I still remember the exact way he said it, like it had been living on the edge of his lips for years, and finally decided it couldn't stay hidden anymore. We were standing in the kitchen. Nothing special, morning light, coffee between us. The quiet rhythm of a life we had built so carefully. And then he looked at me, really looked, and said, "I want to give you something. Something that's been in my heart for a long time." There was a softness in his voice, a quiet intensity I hadn't felt before. I laughed at first, thinking it was a surprise trip or a gift. But when he explained, slowly, carefully, I felt the air shift around us. A private weekend, a secluded place, another couple we trusted, and then that pause, that look, the one that said more than his words ever could. I remember the way my fingers tightened around my cup, the way my heart started racing, not out of fear exactly, but something far more complicated. Something that lingered in the space between hesitation and curiosity, because in his eyes, I didn't see distance. I saw closeness, I saw trust, and I saw a man who wasn't asking to change us, but to feel us more deeply. And what happened that weekend? The way he watched me. The way I discovered something inside myself I didn't know existed. It didn't pull us apart. It bound us in a way I'm still trying to find words for. I'm not sure I ever fully will, but I'll tell you everything I can. The days leading up to the trip felt like living in two worlds at once. On the outside, everything was normal. We went to work, we shared meals, we talked about small things. But underneath it all, there was a quiet current running between us. He didn't pressure me, not once. That's what made it harder to ignore. Every now and then, I'd catch him looking at Minot in the familiar way I'd known for years, but with something new layered into it, something almost searching, like he was wondering who I might become. And strangely, I started wondering the same thing. At night, lying beside him, I'd replay our conversation. The way he chose his words so carefully, the way he made sure I knew this wasn't about replacing anything we had. It was about expanding it, about trust, about letting ourselves be seen completely. There was one moment a few nights before we left, when I finally asked him the question, sitting quietly in my chest. "Why this?" I whispered. He didn't answer right away. He just reached for my hand, brushing his thumbs slowly across my skin. "Because I've always believed," he said gently, "that you're more than even you let yourself be." That stayed with me. Not the idea of the weekend, but the way he saw me. The villa was exactly what he promised, quiet, wrapped in nature like it existed outside of time. The kind of place where the world feels distant and everything becomes more noticeable, even silence. When we arrived, I felt it immediately. That mixture of excitement and nervousness settling deep in my chest. He noticed, of course. He always notices. Without saying anything, he stepped closer behind me, his hands resting lightly at my waist, not holding me tightly, just there, grounding. "I'm right here," he murmured, and somehow, that was enough. When the other couple arrived, it didn't feel like anything I had imagined. There was no awkwardness, no sudden shift, just warmth, familiar smiles, easy laughter, conversations that flowed as naturally as any evening we'd shared before. We opened wine, sat together under soft lighting, talked about everything and nothing. And yet, beneath it all, there was something unspoken, a quiet awareness, the kind that builds slowly, like a melody just beginning to take shape. I caught my husband watching me more than once that evening, not possessive, not distant, but deeply present. Like every expression on my face mattered to him more than anything else in the room. It didn't change all at once. That's what I remember most. It unfolded. A shift in proximity, someone sitting just a little closer, a hand brushing past mine and lingering half a second longer than usual, a glance that held just a bit too long, until I felt it in my chest. And every time something new happened, I looked at him, my husband, because somehow, his reaction meant more than anything else. And every time I met his eyes, I saw it, not doubt, not regret, but something deeper, a kind of quiet awe. Like he was watching me step into a version of myself he had always believed was there, and instead of pulling me back, he let me go just enough to discover it. At one point, music began playing softly in the background. I don't even remember who turned it on, but suddenly we were all standing, moving slowly, almost instinctively, not dancing in any structured way, just swaying. Close enough to feel each other's presence, far enough to still choose every step. I felt his hands find mine again, and then, gently, he turned me toward him. For a moment, it was just us. Like the rest of the world had softened around the edges. His forehead pressed lightly against mine, his breath warm, steady. "Are you okay?" he asked quietly. I smiled. Not because everything was simple, but because everything felt real. "Yes," I whispered, and I meant it. Because in that moment, I didn't feel lost. I felt seen. The rest of the evening blurred into something softer, more fluid. Moments layered over each other. Laughter, pauses filled with meaning instead of words. There were times I stepped forward, and times I leaned back into him, and every time, he was there, not controlling, not distant, but connected, like an anchor that moved with me instead of holding me still. There was one moment I'll never forget. I turned slightly, caught between everything unfolding around me, and there he was, watching, not with uncertainty, but with something so full it made my chest ache. Pride, love, and something deeper I can't quite name. I walked back to him then, without thinking, without hesitation. And when he wrapped his arms around me, it didn't feel like I was returning. It felt like I had never left. That night didn't end with a single moment. It softened, faded gently, like the last notes of a song you don't want to finish. And somehow, that made it even more meaningful, because it wasn't about reaching an end. It was about everything we felt along the way. The next morning, sunlight filled the room in that quiet, peaceful way that only comes after something deeply emotional. I awoke before him, just watching, tracing the familiar lines of his face, but seeing them differently now. Not because he had changed, but because I had seen him more fully. When his eyes opened, he didn't speak right away. He just looked at me, and I saw it again. That same expression, soft, certain, connected. "Are you okay?" he asked, echoing the night before. I smiled, reaching for his hand. "I think." I paused, searching for the right words. "I think I understand you better now." He exhaled quietly, like something inside him had finally settled. And then he pulled me closer, pressing a gentle kiss against my forehead. One of those rare, quiet kisses that carries more meaning than anything spoken. We spent the rest of the weekend wrapped in that same feeling, not intensity, not confusion, but closeness, deeper than before, easier somehow. Like something unspoken between us had finally been given space to breathe. On the drive home, I leaned my head against the window, watching the world slowly return to its usual pace. But inside me, something had shifted, not dramatically, not in a way that changed who I was, but in a way that expanded it. And when I looked over at him, his hand resting calmly on the steering wheel, I realized something simple but powerful. That weekend hadn't been about anything outside of us. It had always been about us. Our trust, our connection, our willingness to grow together. I reached for his hand then, intertwining my fingers with his. He squeezed gently. And in that small, familiar gesture, I felt everything we had built over the years. Stronger, deeper, unshaken. Because in the end, it wasn't the place, or the people, or even the experience itself. It was the way he looked at me through it all, like I was still his home. And maybe, more than ever before, he was mine too.